Welcome one and all. Wednesday evening, our first Wednesday in the month of June. We had a few in May already. We are looking at the Bible and the Josiah Manifesto. Book came out in September by Messianic Jewish Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. And we are seeing the things that he has referenced. We've gone up to the current events leading up to the last couple years here, right up until January of 2023. And we are now at the last part of the book, the Manifesto. These are Mr. Jonathan Cahn's own personal words. They are not scripture any more than my words are scripture. And these are some things that we're looking at. We're looking to scriptures and having some conversations about his points in the manifesto using the example of Josiah in the scriptures as a role model, a manifesto for going into the end times and how to as I say, I kind of see it in three phases. One, the awareness, kind of a state of the union, awareness of the state of affairs currently and a Christian response to that. And thirdly, most importantly, not settling for being reactionary, but also being proactive and bringing the goodness of God and Christ into this society and where everything goes. So the scriptures we will be getting to, as teased up last week, will be Daniel chapter 3, but we'll look at a couple of things before we get right to there. So let's pick up where we left off in this here. Hello, there we go. That, and we'll do that. And one more thing on my end. And we are in business. This is the last section of Jonathan Cahn's Josiah Manifesto we left off with. So let's refresh this and then we'll move on to the next. He says this, inasmuch as one's participation in any institution or in any part, function, or aspect of that institution would constitute participation in evil or the compromising of one's walk with God, then one must separate from that institution or from that part thereof. Basically, we're saying here, if we're part of an organization or group, institution, whatever, and either the whole thing just goes off the deep end towards evil or away from God, or one part of it does, either we need to, and we're involved and attached, we either need to separate from the part that's gone that way, if it's just one part, or if it need be the whole thing, if the whole thing's gone that way. And as I mentioned last week too often, sadly enough, when one part is infected with this, it often spreads to the rest eventually anyway. So we find too often, sadly, that some of our engagements and involvements can only go so long before the line comes to us and we're like, sorry, I can't go there with you, and we're going to have to agree to disagree and part ways here from there. Any initial reactions, again, looking at this afresh this week on this section of the manifesto? I'll share what he said again about this part. Many institutions that once served the purposes of God now war against them. Countless believers send their children to public schools to be indoctrinated against everything they've taught them about faith and God. Those same parents will then spend their life savings to send their children to college to receive years of intensive indoctrination aimed at undermining and undoing everything they've spent all the previous years accomplishing. I remember in high school, I had an English teacher. I really liked her, but she said, we're going to, and I'm going to paraphrase it poorly, but basically, we're going to tell you all the things your parents didn't tell you, or we're going to, basically along those lines. And I thought, cool, expand our horizons. That's good. We don't want to be too sheltered or anything. And she had a nice enough character and personality. I don't think she was on the attack against parents at that time. Opening horizons is one thing, but dishonoring, disrespecting, and trying to subvert parents is another. And that's where, unfortunately, we see things have gone to this point. Yeah. So all good on this part. Here we go into new territory. Now, remember, this is the Josiah Manifesto, and we'll talk more about him as we go. one of the points that's made about Josiah is he didn't wait on others to do the right thing. He led the charge. He was the first to do it. And he actually broke the spell, and that is the next section we're going to talk about here. Once Josiah resisted, John Kahn shares here, the consensus was shattered. The sacred cows of his culture lost their aura. The gods lost their authority. Houses of cards began to crumble. It only took one man, one act of courage, and the spell was broken. So here's the manifesto relating to that. The gods, the sacred cows and falsehoods of any age only remain standing as long as they stand unchallenged, as long as their commandments remain unquestioned and their taboos unbroken. The righteous must challenge the unchallengeable, question the unquestionable, think the unthinkable, speak the unspeakable, and break the unbreakable. They must be willing to do what no one before has dared to do. They must be willing to be the first, the breaker of the spell. And again, these are the words of the man, Jonathan Cahn. But what are your initial reactions to this?
I believe that's right. You know, I didn't do what they said. I didn't stay home.
You rebel.
I go, but when I had opportunity, I would say something to other people. And there were a lot of people, you know, they're thinking about it. Well, of course, I'm going, oh no, you're not right. You're dying. Well, that doesn't make them right in what they're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you know, there's some people who will not listen to you. But
Sure.
there are other people who will. Like the little boy, when I was talking to his mother, he said, is that right? To her, I think I told you that already, so, but maybe not.
Go ahead.
Because I had said to her, well, you know, I said, that mask you're wearing is like a surgical mask. She said, yeah. And she had other kids too. I said, but you know, surgical masks are not worn by doctors in order to protect them from the patient. They are worn to protect the patient from them.
Mm-hmm.
I said, so the only good that's doing you is to keep what you're breathing out from going out into the air.
Right.
Keeping anything else. Her voice said, is that right? She goes, yeah, well, yeah. Yeah. So, you know, she wasn't even thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was hoping that what I said would help her say, no, I think my kids wear this mask.
Well, think about it. People flipping burgers, you know, at the fast food place, they wear hairnets to protect meat.
Yeah. From her hair.
Right. It's the same thing. Yeah, so, but it wasn't the common thought out there.
Everybody has heard when you have salad thing as a sneeze guard.
Sneeze guard, yeah.
But if you don't say anything, you just go along, then you're not really helping their cause. They're helping their cause.
Mm-hmm. Now, remember when the example that we're talking about with the COVID pandemic outbreak and all that stuff, when everything very first happened, and we talked a lot about it here within our own church and how much we, and all of the other brothers and sister churches, each church being independent, we were in communication with each other. We were in discussion and consulting with each other, but ultimately each church was doing whatever they felt was led and was right to do in their churches. Some had more older congregations, some were younger, so different things work for different churches, and we respected that. But I remember at that very beginning of that all, to this point, no one really knew what was going on or how long it would go on. You know, to flatten the curve, yeah. Oh, you mean 2 years? Exactly. And so there was some, because there was some doubt, there was some benefit of the doubt initially, but sadly, as we saw, things started to become more and more questionable. And we saw a lot of pushback on questioning. You know, here we are right here. Now, this is talking about something dealing with society, but this did affect, as I said, this did affect churches. This did affect worship and services and what were considered essential businesses and what were not, and things like that, and who got to decide that. And so And constitutional, of course, these rights in the Constitution don't come from the Constitution. They're God-given rights that the Constitution spells out, some of them, and it even says this ain't all of them. But in the First Amendment, right to assembly, right to religion, which includes worship and all those things. Yeah. So all of that, and the point here is not being so, we talked about fear a few weeks ago too, not being so afraid of society that it compromises not only your faith, but your service. And so, yeah, so those are very important, Sister Ashley.
One of the things that came to my mind that happened recently, I saw on the news, was that there was some guy, I think he might have been a military veteran, and he pulled down a statue.
Yes.
The Church of Satan.
Yes.
Put a statue up on something.
Yep.
And he came and pulled it down, and they arrested him for a hate crime or religious discrimination.
Yep.
Crime. Now, I just heard recently that they just dismissed that.
Absolutely.
But I thought that was really, really interesting. And a lot of things can be said about that.
Yes.
But, how many people would be, willing to go to jail for something like that, because obviously we're not, the Church of Satan openly says that they don't worship Satan, so therefore I don't see how it could be a religious hate crime, but to somebody, he said, this is wrong. It's just wrong, because most people would say, oh, well, just let them do whatever, just let them whatever, I mean, so that's what that kind of reminded me of, is these false gods, it would have stood there and let this guy.
If it stayed unchallenged.
Hold it down.
Yeah, these things stand as long as they go unchallenged. Yeah.
After school.
Yeah. To Sister Ashley's point too, if you can actually go to their website, the Church of Satan, they say we don't worship Satan. This is basically not a religion. It's more of a, he's more like their mascot. And this is for all, just like how Saul Alinsky dedicated his Rules for Radicals to the first radical, Lucifer, and all that stuff. So yeah, so that, but by kind of showing that they're not a true religion anyway.
Yeah, they want to be
But,
treated as
yeah.
such. They want to have all the protections of that.
And so here we are, where we're told, okay, you can't ask questions about this. You can't challenge this. Well, this is America, and we have God-given life and free will and freedom of conscience and thought, so and expression. So no one has any right or authority to say what we can or can't do in those capacities, including expressing ourselves, even if we are wrong. And the Lord's people, all of us, we're still human, sin infected. You hear me say all the time, I've been wrong about some things. I bet I'm wrong about some things now, and I'll find out later as I go. But if there isn't the freedom to be wrong, what is freedom? There's only freedom to be right. Well, who decides what that is and declares and decides that for everyone else? So freedom to disagree and freedom to differ and digress and to live our own lives in defiance of the norms or whatever is incredibly necessary freedom. So the example that he gives here, who remembers the wonderful children's story, The Emperor's New Clothes?
Oh.
So basically, as we recall, as the story goes, emperor in this town or whatever, empire, because he's an emperor, and these scammers come along and they say, hey, we've got these very spiffy clothes, but only the special people can really see. It's with magical thread. Only the special people who are really smart, I forget what the criteria was, but only the really in-crowd people, the really top-notch people can actually see these clothes. The ones who can't see these clothes, they're the dummies, they're the scums, they're the ooh, taboo. You don't want to be one of those people who can't see these clothes. And they actually believed this or bought into it or so afraid. So when they're actually showing the clothes that are nothing, they're basically playing on people's pride and insecurities. And so no one wants to say, I don't see anything, because that would mean, oh, you're one of those people. Okay. They wanted to be accepted and on the in-crowd. So, Oh, yeah, yeah, I see it. Oh, wow, isn't that nice looking? And so to the point where the emperor goes on parade in front of the whole town naked. And as we know, the story goes, a little boy there who is probably asking about a mask or something, he says, hey, that guy's not wearing any clothes. And what did that do? It broke the spell. Because the child was innocent. It was the innocence of a child that broke the spell of the silly adult who got caught up in the pressure of society, wanted to be accepted, not wanted to be an outlier, not wanting to be one of the bad guys. And so how much do we see that happening today? Whether it's cancel culture, whether it's just, hey, go along with this and just smile and nod, and you don't want to be disruptive. You want to go along with everything because this is the way we're going. Yeah, the little child burbled up, emperor has no clothes, spell broken. That's what we're called to do. You okay, sis? I get your water bottle, but you want a flat soda? Okay. So this brings us up to the next section here, and this will aim us closer to Daniel 3 here, talking about kind of foundations and underpinnings of these things. As we see, this crumbles once the little Jenga sliver is pulled out of it. So here we go. When a civilization turns away from God, get my little point here. When a civilization turns away from God, it removes, oh, Eric made a typo. It removes the supports, props, and underpinnings that once encouraged its people to follow the ways of God, to spread his word, and to transmit their faith to the next generation. It replaces those supports and props with impediments, disincentives, obstacles, and opposition against their faith. Therefore, the people of God can no longer presume or rely on the support of their culture. They must begin building their own vessels, underpinnings, channels, networks, organizations, subcultures, countercultures, and if needed, an underground to allow, enable, support, and empower the living, the practicing, the spreading, and transmission of their faith.
That's a lot of words.
That's a lot of words. We're going to break it down and talk about it here. So let's take the first chunk here. When a civilization, we talked about the word culture the other week. Here we're talking about the word civilization. So compare and contrast. When a civilization turns away from God, well, that means it was first looking at God to turn away from God. It removes, pretend there's an E right there. It removes, silent E, invisible E, just like the emperor's clothes. It removes the supports, props, and underpinnings that once encourages people to follow the ways of God. So pause right there. When a civilization turns away from God, it's removing the supports in society that were there promoting God and the things of God. Society turns, think of society as a tent with tent stakes in the ground. When a society turns away from God, it rips up the tent stakes that were keeping it moored to the ground of the foundation. So, removes the supports, props, and underpinnings that once encourages people. Once upon a time, people in civilization were encouraged to follow the ways of God. They were encouraged to spread his word, and they were encouraged to transmit their faith to the next generation. With the civilization turning away from God, those supports, props, and underpinnings being taken away, now that's not happening.
The kids stop reading the Bible.
Kids stop reading the Bible. Yeah.
Stop teaching the Bible.
Stop teaching, yes.
College, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. The movie God's Not Dead 2. Is Jesus Christ a historical figure or not? Is the Bible a historical record or not? You know, and did people of history quote the Bible? Can we not reference people of history quoting the Bible? So yeah. So So what happens then? Well, if that's gone, what comes in? It replaces those supports and props, things that were in favor, with the exact opposite. Impediments, things that get in the way or impede. Disincentives. We are going to punish you if you do this. We're going to make it life harder for you if you do this. In fact, someone related to this whole COVID thing was just testifying recently, and a recording was played where he talked about making life difficult for people until they get a jab. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I missed that. But yeah, try to go to Hawaii, it was ridiculous. You couldn't go to any restaurant or to any event or anything unless you had a test, negative test within 48 hours. 48 hours. So they want you to take a test every 2 days,
Mhm.
really?
Yeah. So disincentives. Oh, if you don't have this, you can't come here. Obstacles, roadblocks, things, and opposition against their faith. And part of faith is, remember the phrase conscientious objector?
Memorial service, because the state they lives in, New Mexico, he could go out of state, he could not come in for 2 weeks,
Oh,
and
wow.
he would have lost his job.
Wow. Oh, I'm sorry he had to miss out on that because of that. That's sad. And remember all the people who were separated from their loved ones in nursing home, all the birthdays and things missed, and all the surgeries that didn't take place because those were because of different prioritizing of screenings and treatments, things that didn't get tended to. So yeah,
You never had service wrong with that.
that's
He
right.
died right at the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. So
Heart surgery was postponed.
yeah,
And he didn't do it, and so she died.
so yeah, so we've got civilization deciding for everyone else who matters and who doesn't, what's a priority and what isn't, based on their own agenda, which is clearly not a godly one.
Yeah, shut down churches, keep bars open.
Yeah,
That's what they did. And retail open. Some of them.
which is why one pastor went up on the by the podium and took off his jacket, took off his tie, said, "Hey, we're one of those places, so we're essential." Yeah. Anyway, therefore, since we recognize that's the state of civilization and it's going more and more in that direction, don't exactly see it turning around. Therefore, the people of God can no longer presume or rely on the support of their culture. Let me just stop at that sentence. This is a big one. And it's sad that this even has to be said. And I wish this were not the case. I hope it doesn't continue to be the case or become even more so the case, but that's the direction and the inertia and that it's all happening in. Where once upon a time, live and let live again, hey, like Jefferson said, if my neighbor believes in no God or 20 gods, it doesn't break my leg or steal my wallet. It's of no impact to me. So live and let live basically was Jefferson's whole point with that, as far as faith goes. And society used to be that way. Not only was it a predominantly Christian society, but in that Christian society was the recognition of free will for those who weren't Christian, who were other religions or no religion, free will. And so we want ours to be respected. We therefore want to respect that of others too. We're happy to share and engage and have conversations, but ultimately it's respect and freedom, and no longer the case. The people of God can no longer presume or rely on the support of their culture. Oh, you're one of those God followers. Oh, you're one of those Bible people. You're one of them Christian folks. Oh, then you're one of the haters. Then you're one of the narrow-minded. You're one of the primitive superstitious. I mean, all the different labels I can, and basically aiming towards the dehumanizing of us is where it's all going eventually. Just as we talked about different categories of people that got dehumanized throughout history, and some of them are today, Christians will be on that list. And so the point is, where we used to be able to count on culture at the very least, leaving us alone and supporting our freedom to worship and follow our God-given conscience, we cannot count on culture supporting that anymore. In fact, we can look to, let me put it this way, movie in the 30s, Gentleman's Agreement, Gregory Peck, best picture, I think he won the Oscar for it, best actor as well. Elia Kazan directed it. He was a reporter who had a girlfriend, and he went undercover pretending to be Jewish just to see how he got treated and all the places that turned him down and everything. And his girlfriend, his fiance, I think they were engaged. You know, how far are you going to take this? Come on, enough now. You're being disrupted. This is disrupting me now. And it really convicted him and really opened his eyes because he didn't realize how much was out there. And so the blatant anti-Semitism that happened out there before, that we see having a resurgence now, Christians are going to be part of that too. And obviously with the Jewish people and the Lord's use of and work and plan for them, that's its own unique thing. I'm not conflating us and them, but I'm saying in a similar manner, it's going to be closed doors to Christians and closed opportunities. Government's already been caught trying to pressure banks not to allow loans and businesses, you know, loans for certain types of businesses and industries and things like that.
Everybody with a book.
Yeah. So can't rely on the support of their culture. So what do we do? I used to go to this institution in the culture and civilization for this resource, for this information, for the supplies, for this. What do I do now? Well, people of God must begin building their own vessels and underpinnings. When society has lost its underpinnings of God, we've got to have our own channels, networks. Network doesn't mean TV networks. It means interactions and contacts, people. Yeah. Channels, networks, organizations, subcultures, countercultures. Now we're talking about the hippies again. No, we're talking about, to be a subculture is a separate part of a bigger culture. To be a counterculture is to be part of something that's contradictory or different from the prevailing or dominant culture, which we are certainly becoming more and more so. And if needed, an underground. Now, wait a minute. Runaway slaves had an underground. Christians in China have an underground. Yeah, that's where we're talking. That's kind of where we're going with this. This is all preparatory here. Not that we are a cult, not that we are paranoid, not that we are doomsday or any of that stuff. We are calm, rational people with faith in God, who is our provider and protector. We're not going to do anything rash or stupid or panicky. This is about situational awareness and where we're at, what we're dealing with, and not being so, his point here is not being so dependent on this culture that's turning away from us, that we are left hanging. We need to be able to provide our own electricity and AC and work, baby, work. Yes. Was someone hearing me? Did I upset Edison?
Particularly, Francine. What's her name?
Rasfield?
No, when you wrote the books. Rivers. No, Rivers.
Oh, Rivers.
Yes.
I don't know a lot of French.
Several of the books that I have read there, we've read here in church that I read years ago. She sent them in Israel, and some of the prophets had to have this underground thing going on in the culture, because the Christians were looked down on by the regular Jews, the Hebrews. They're like, no, this is not the guy. And they were very adamant about it. Like Paul, what did he do?
Right. Yeah, he was persecuting the Christians.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the subculture you're talking about.
Good example.
But that's the underground that we're talking